south of the border, down Mexico way. That's where I fell in love when the stars above came out to play. And now as I wander...
Hello there, all you expat wannabes. I'm Johnny Mueller, and you're listening to the Expat Files, Living in Latin America, the show that tells you just what it's like to live, work, play, and or retire down here in Latin America. It's a mix of the good, the bad, the ugly, and the great, and it's all right here, so let's get started.
Let me tell you about something strange that happened the other day. I opened the refrigerator, and I saw a 2-gallon plastic jug of bottled water. I'm talking about store-bought bottled water. Not the kind I make with my own under-counter water purification system. So I'm thinking, how'd that get there? I never would buy that stuff. That's why I put so much time and effort into working out my own purification system. So I'd never have to drink that iffy water in plastic bottles that everyone else drinks. So I said to my cleaning lady, she comes in twice a week, and I know it's got to be hers. She admitted it was hers, and I said, why? When you've got an unlimited supply of extremely pure water right on tap from this little gooseneck faucet. So then I pointed at it. I said, I don't care if you fill up gallons of that stuff and bring it home. We've got a pretty much unlimited supply of extra pure water. I said, why do you think I installed that thing? And she looked at me, paused for a minute, kind of got a little nervous, wrung her hands, slightly embarrassed. She said, Don Johnny, I'm sorry, lo siento, but I just don't like the way your water tastes. Then it was my turn to make a face and get silent. I was stumped. It took me a couple of seconds to realize she didn't like my water because it had absolutely no taste at all. And her water, the store-bought bottled water, always has a tinge of chlorine or some kind of taste or odor to it. Usually smelling more of plastic than of chlorine. I mean, look, it has to. It's been sitting in a plastic bottle for days, weeks, even months. In fact, at my Expat Insider seminars, I like to show a couple of photos of how they store and transport that water here in the tropics, and I suppose it's the same up by you, except the sun is infinitely more intense down here. So when the water company trucks come rambling by early in the morning, dropping off pallets of the stuff at grocery stores, etc., it almost always ends up sitting out in the back of the place in direct sunlight on a loading ramp for hours, if not days at a time. You see that stuff everywhere here in Latin America. Just take a ride through any big city. It's a very common sight. And of course, all of us know the sunlight deteriorates plastic in a hurry. Just check out any piece of plastic, even a kid's toy left out in the front yard for a couple of days. Not to mention, look what the sun does to the plastic parts of a car. And think of how hot the seat and the dashboard in your car gets when they're left in the sun too. And microscopically, we know that water in a plastic bottle starts to accumulate molecules of plastic the longer you leave it in the sun. And of course, we drink that stuff. That's what it's for. That's why right now, every cell in your body has some plastic monomer in it. I know it sounds disgusting, but trust me, look it up. You'll find it's 100% true. Now, over the years, I've had a chance to talk to a lot of Latino old-timers. They told me that around 1990 is when they made this switch over. Used to be all the 5-gallon containers of plastic you see right now were 5-gallon containers made out of glass. And man, did the people rejoice when that happened. Why? Because glass breaks and it's very heavy. Though the secondary effect that no one ever thought about was that now everyone's water was contaminated with more and more plastic. Now, I've had some people ask me, gringos and expats, because Latinos aren't concerned with this. They say, Johnny, look, you're going to wash your dishes in the normal water coming out of the tap, which is somewhat contaminated. No matter where you are, up in the States, down here in Latin America, it doesn't make any difference. And then your dishes are going to sit on the counter drying off, and when the water's all evaporated, it's going to be a residue. There has to be a microscopic residue of whatever was in that water. So then people will say, then, Johnny, you'll put your pure water in that glass. Aren't you just going to redissolve that microcontaminant film and drink that stuff anyway? Hey, I thought of that a long time ago, and that's the beauty of having an under-the-counter pure water system, because you got it on demand and it's always flowing as long as you open the valve. By the way, if you want a photo of my actual system and the gooseneck faucet that I use, send me an email, theexpatfiles@gmail.com. So anyway, in regards to the fact that when dishes dry, they leave behind some contaminants. Well, I know that. Now, you could wash all your dishes in purified water. For that matter, you could go so far as to take a shower in purified water too. But that is in no way an efficient use of that water. So, How I deal with that problem is that after I wash my dishes, I rinse them quickly with some pure water. Because, if you set up an under-counter, 3-canister filter system like I have, you'll have not necessarily an unlimited supply of ultra-pure water, but you'll have plenty of it, more than enough to rinse your dishes with. And as for showering with ultra-pure water, well, that's a good idea, but there's not enough flow or pressure to do that. Oh, one more thing. If you're hearing a lot of noise in the background, they're doing some construction in the place next door. So if you hear some banging, some voices, some hammering, tough. Nothing I can do about it. So anyway, the fact is my cleaning lady does not like my water. And I don't like hers, so we're even. And in that uncomfortable little moment when we had that discussion, I had no real desire to train her up on it. That would be pointless. What good would it do? She wouldn't listen anyway. You know the old saying, you only fight the battles you know you can win. And in her case, I think she has a 4th grade education. Po folks have po habits. She thinks anything you buy at the store has got to be pure. And I guess the same thing goes with people using bottled water up in the States. They believe it's pure, that they're getting a great filtered product. That's okay, let them think that. Oh, but get this. Occasionally you get the die-hard gringo who's gone native, who'll drink just about anything you put in front of him as long as it's free. Who says, Johnny, look at all the people who don't buy bottled water down here. They know you're not supposed to drink from the tap, but they do it anyway. You don't see them doubling over, up-chucking, walking off the job, or going to the emergency room. And you know what? They're absolutely right. I've been involved in many construction projects, and all the construction workers drink from the tap. Then again, the doctors down here will tell you 60 to 80% of people have intestinal parasites, too. And still, the life expectancy here in Latin America is about the same as it is up in the States. And it's obvious, too, that old people down here are way more active than older people up in the States. And they're healthier far into old age, too. In other words, when they finally kick the bucket, they're not obese and on 18 different medications. You don't see knee and hip replacements or heart stents either. In other words, when Latin Americans check out, they check out with all original parts. All right, so we're into 3/4 of a year now or more with this Cov-Idiots stuff, and Expat Eddie just checked in. Now, Expat Eddie's one of those guys who refuses to wear a mask unless he's absolutely forced into it. Because, down here in Latin America, like up in the States, there are all kinds of mandatory mask rules now. Stop me now if I've told this story before. Hey, I'm bound to repeat myself sometimes. I mean, I've done 1,000+ shows now. How am I supposed to remember if I've repeated something? So stop me if you heard this one. Expat Eddie and his girlfriend went to a Jeep dealership in El Salvador. And on the door they had the usual sign saying you must wear a mask and use copious amounts of that snot-like hand goop. Dem's the rules, so said the sign. But Eddie and his girlfriend walked in without masks. Well, that's not completely true. They actually had masks dangling from one ear. So as they walked over to the display of cars, a guy walked over, he had his mask on and said, "Excuse me, you have to wear a mask." He said it in Spanish, nicely, and Eddie replied nicely in Spanish. "So then you don't mind losing a $50,000 sale just because I won't wear a 10-cent mask? I bet your boss would be really happy about that. Why don't you go tell him?" Well, the guy walked back into his little glass cubicle, and there was 4 other guys sitting there, all wearing masks. He came back out to talk to Eddie without a mask on. And when Eddie looked back at the main cubicle where the other sellers were sitting around kibitzing, surprise, surprise, those guys were no longer wearing masks either. And one guy, the youngest guy, was giving Eddie the thumbs up. Yep, those humans, they're unpredictable except when it comes to money. Speaking of masks, here's an email coming from Deputy Dog. D-A-W-G. Yep, Dog. Yeah, I remember that cartoon, don't you? That very bad Hanna-Barbera cartoon. Hanna-Barbera. Yeah, same guys that did the Flintstones. Man, were they no-talent artists or what? Anyway, starts out, "Dear Johnny, about masks. I'm a retired biochemist living in Panama. In Boquete, where all the retired gringos hang. It's like Panama's version of a Florida old age home. Only nicer, cheaper, and infinitely less backstabbing and gossip." Well, that's nice to know. Then he says, "Johnny, did you know there have been over 170 randomized controlled studies proving that masks provide no protection from respiratory viruses? Riddle me this. If masks provided complete protection, then scientists would need to wear biohazard suits covering the rest of their bodies. The mask would be enough. In fact, if you check out the studies, you'll find wearing masks all day increases the number of bacteria in your mouth. leading to dental problems, strep bacterial infections, and viral infections more dangerous than COVID. Plus, as a biochemist, I know that masks are one use only, and after they get the least bit moist, and that takes about 10 minutes, they become their own focus of infection. Then I ask you, Johnny, and your listeners, how many people do you know throw their mask away after 10 minutes or even one use? Are you kidding? That would mean using 5, 6, or even more masks a day per person, and that would add up to a fortune, especially with people who still have to report in to a job. Again, speaking as a biochemist, using an ear loop mask impedes respiration for extended periods, raising CO2 concentration in your blood, which takes hours to rectify for just minutes of wearing the stupid mask. This is not a lowering of oxygen problem, as most mask know-it-all imbeciles point to. The thing is, your blood oxygen may be fine after wearing a mask, but CO2 tends to climb to toxic levels the longer you use the mask. I could cite the workplace OSHA regs, but they're too long. But they do have massive fines for workplace violations, one of them being reusing of masks. Oh, and Johnny, I know you and your listeners can handle this. I will not take the vaccine. And I have a couple of friends who will back me up. One's name is Smith and one's Wesson. And if they aren't around at the time, there's another couple of boys named Remington and Colt. Got those two guys in my back pocket. And if you got nothing against foreigners, there's always Mr. Sig and Mr. Sauer. Over and out, Deputy Dog. All right, thanks for that, Deputy Dog. El Cabong to you. Then comes this email from Carlos. He says, Dear Johnny, as an ophthalmologist trained in the States and working in Costa Rica, I work constantly at a distance of about 25 centimeters from the face of my patients. That's about 10 inches from their mouth, eyes, and nose. So naturally, I have a great interest in the subject of masks. Now, if the virus has an average size of 60 to 160 nanometers, and the gaps between the fibers of an N95 mask never smaller than 300 nanometers, that means from 2 to 5 COVID-19 virus particles can march shoulder to shoulder through any one of those pores, making masks an inefficient defense against the virus. However, if you could somehow generate an electrostatic field between the mask fabric and the virus surface, the particles would be trapped. However, that would entail that each mask has something like a small watch battery in it. That, along with a fine wire mesh in the mask, would drive up the cost to at least $10 a piece in quantity. Then he says, I wonder why the market has not, to this point anyway, produced such a mask, because they sure would be in great demand. The problem is there are no sound scientific guidelines for masks, with wearing of a mask and social distancing, for that matter, being more psychological than anything. Same thing with temperature checks. The question is, do they work? It's not about what works or not, it's what the herd demands psychologically. If you don't fit the psychology, you'll be marginalized and called out as a contagion spreader, even though the science is in your favor. One more thing about the virus, it doesn't travel through the air dry. It's always bound in water molecules, and masks are very good at accumulating humidity. And that's why OSHA guidelines say masks should be changed after they become humid and never reused. By the way, did you know that the physics of particle motion would dictate that the most at-risk profession is not doctors or nurses or caregivers, it's garbage men. After all, they're the ones that have to deal with the millions of humid, virus-laden masks that are haphazardly disposed of in the garbage every day. So, statistically, garbage men should be getting COVID at an unprecedented rate. The question being, is anyone studying that? Garbage men, basureros. Think about it. All right, sticking with the healthcare theme, comes this email from Expat Insider Seminar repeat offender, Jan. She says, Dear Johnny, here is some information which I hope you will share with your listeners. And although this information is geared to disabled and older people, I think everyone should benefit from this. To find out the COVID restrictions for each country, check out the CDC Center for Disease Control and Prevention website. Then she lists the link here, but I checked it out, and they're pretty much way too generic. And it seems like almost every country you check, it's a cookie-cutter approach, and they repeat the same message. Now, as for me, I found the very best site to check out the latest and greatest Cov-Idiots regs when traveling to different countries is that website I told you about before, developed by MIT. You just plug in the country you want to travel to, the dates or range of dates. It'll not only find you the very best deals and airfares, It'll give you the total breakdown of the Cov-Idiot requirements at the airport and while traveling through that country. Here's the website. It's called Great Escape, all one word, .co. Not .com, but .co. GreatEscape.co. Personally, I've never, ever found a better site that combines it all. But I know most Americans, anyway, will go to the CDC website, Center for Disease Control, even if the info is old or just bullshit. Why? Because that's what U.S. government regs are based on. Now, as for the rest of Jen's email, she has some really good information here. It's general information for people traveling with meds or people who've got some kind of disability, or if you just carry a lot of vitamins and supplements like I do through borders, because you just might have to answer some questions. All right, let's go through the list. Number 1, she says, have all medication and prescriptions filled before you leave. Bring more than enough to cover you for the entire trip, just in case you get delayed or get quarantined. Now, remember, you're not going to get quarantined unless you test positive while you're in another country. Now, think of this for a second. Suppose you're in a foreign country and you're ready to leave for home. The regs just might say you need another Cov-Idiot test to get back home or go through the airport. And in fact, I know a few gringos and expats who did test positive while attempting to travel back home. And in every case, they were just told to go back to their hotel or wherever they were staying and sit there for 10 days, take another test, and when they tested negative, they were free to go. But the fact is that since down here anyway, there are no Cov-Idiot police, except in airports, because, every country has Cov-Idiot rules at airports. Now, these gringos and one gringo who tested positive went home, but they didn't stay there. After a couple of days, when they were feeling better, moseyed on out, went to grocery stores, took walks, did some sightseeing, etc. Because in all cases, they only felt flu-like symptoms for a couple of days. Why? Because they were taking all the right things. Zinc, vitamin C and D, and hydroxychloroquine. That anti-malaria medicine that's taking so much heat in the press these days, even though it's been proven effective and safe for the last, 80 years now? Anyway, the fact is, everyone I know who's tested positive and had to go into quarantine, they weren't stuck in any government hospital or facility. They just were told to go home or to their hotel and sit it out till they tested negative. But nobody ever checked on them. And in my mind, I'm thinking, if you're taking the right stuff, it'd be almost a blessing, well, good luck anyway, to test positive, have no symptoms or moderate flu-like symptoms for a few days. Then as nature takes its course, in 7 to 10 days, you'll test negative again, and it's over with. You got no worries. And in the end, I guess that's going to happen to everyone. Like the measles and the mumps, everyone in this world will eventually get dosed, have or not have symptoms. Then it's back to business as usual, huh? Well, no, it won't be business as usual. Because as the old joke goes, actually it's a new joke, a guy goes into the doctor's office. He says, Doc, tell me, when's this Cov-Idiot thing going to be done? When is it going to be over? And the doc says, don't ask me, I'm not a politician. Yeah, right, ain't it the truth? But I digress as usual. Where were we? Oh yeah, Jen's universal travel suggestions for people on meds and people who are handicapped or compromised. Wait a minute. I guess you can't say handicapped anymore. You got to say disabled, right? Well, as a pretty good golfer in a past life, it would be kind of awkward for me to tell someone in my foursome that I had a 2-stroke disability, not a 2-stroke handicap. And what about horses at the track? Do the tipsters handicap them or call them disabled? But then again, the world has gone crazy, hasn't it? By the way, in high school, I was a very good golfer. I got offered a college scholarship. I didn't take it, though, because I figured my future would be more assured if I took the engineering scholarship instead. Turned out to be a great decision, because I knew I couldn't be a Tiger Woods. Though I was pretty good. I knew my limits. I would freeze up under pressure. Flew a lot of short putts that way. But back then as a senior in high school, when I passed on that golf thing, my friends were disappointed, thought I was nuts. Because when you're young, dumb, and foolish, boys are crazy about being sports stars. It's only when you get a bit older you realize about 1 in a million can make a living that way. And the rest of the high school sports stars become mailmen, UPS drivers, teachers, live off their wives and girlfriends or live in mom's basement, and dream of those high school glory days. Yep, that's where a lot of people peak, in high school. Hey, I got lucky. It could have been me. But I digress again. Sorry about that. All right, number 2 on Jen's travel list. Make sure your medication is in your carry-on baggage and not in your checked baggage. Airlines do lose stuff, you know. Each one of them has a huge lost and found department just chock full of unclaimed baggage that goes back years and years. Number 3, have copies of all your prescriptions to take with you at all times. Because, you know, if you get into an accident or get sick or end up at the hospital, you'll need to tell medics which drugs you're on. And if your Spanish sucks, you'll have a communication breakdown. But docs can read most all prescriptions because medicines have a Latin root. Number 4, make sure that the meds you are taking and bringing into the country are legal in the place you're going to. For example, a woman from the UK got arrested for bringing tramadol, an opioid painkiller. She didn't know it was illegal in Egypt, the country she was traveling to. You can check the website of the embassy of the country you're visiting to find that stuff out. By the way, in a recent past show I mentioned I'd ordered some CBD oil directly from a company up in the States, and I had them send it to my Miami mailbox, and it was forwarded to the Latin country I'm in with the shipping charge, something like $2.50 because it was under a pound. But here's the kicker. In most Latin American countries, CBD oil is not legal yet, nor is it in the country I'm hanging out in right now. But as predicted, the stuff got through A-OK. There were no CBD police waiting for me when I picked up the stuff at the courier pickup office. Though in no way was I expecting trouble. But it just goes to show that though many Latin American countries have the same rules and regs that we have up in the States, they try to copy everything first world. They're just extremely spotty at enforcement. And even if they had the will to do something about it, they don't have the personnel to do the follow-through. So in a way, one of the reasons I ordered the CBD oil was to check the system. Because, you know, a lot of gringos and expats, including expat gonnabes and wannabes up in the States who are sitting on the fence, they've asked me that very question about CBD oil. They're worried they can't get it or will get into some kind of trouble if they try to. So here's my recommendation based on my own personal boots-on-the-ground experience. I would never bring this stuff on an airplane, not in carry-on or checked luggage. But once you get down to your particular Latin country and get settled in, by all means order some of this stuff online and have it shipped to your Miami box. Oh, and the nice thing about that stuff is the box they ship it in is very generic and nondescriptive. Besides that, what lettering is on the box is in English. And I found this by hook and crook. When imported stuff gets checked by government slugs at the aduana, all they're really interested in is imposing a tax. As long as what you're receiving is nicely labeled and boxed, they won't open it. All they care about is what the value of it is on the receipt. Because if you recall, most Latin American countries will allow items coming into the country that are valued under $200, tax-free. And that reg's been in existence maybe only a year to 2 years now. But it's been an absolute godsend to us gringos and expats who like to order stuff on Amazon. Yes, us gringos and expats can talk out of both sides of our mouths and be two-faced when it comes to things like Amazon. Because when you've got no other option and or the price is right, we feed the monster. Hey, I admit it, I'm two-faced about Amazon. I can't stand them, nor Jeff Bezos, nor how they've dominated, taken over, and squeezed an entire economic sector. But I still use them, so I guess I, like so many expats and gringos, have a love-hate relationship with them. By the way, how many of you who hate Amazon hold Amazon stock? All right, point number 5. If you're traveling and have a medical issue and have some kind of equipment to transport with you, believe it or not, airlines are required to transport your medical stuff for free. However, you have to let them know generally 2 weeks in advance that you're bringing something along with you that's medically or health related. You just don't show up with your sleep apnea machine or autographed Stephen Hawking wheelchair and expect the airline to prioritize you and immediately handle it. Though you've got airlines such as Alaska Airlines who nicely explain their policies regarding transportation of medical equipment, getting it on board the aircraft, how it's dealt with at airports, etc., etc. It's on their website. Then Jen supplies me the link here for Alaska Air's policies regarding that stuff. It's a long link, so if you want it, send me an email, theexpatfiles@gmail.com. And Jen, thanks for that list. I'm sure it will come in handy for lots and lots of people. In fact, I'd say for every one of my now will be 18 Expat Insider seminars. I've had at least 1 or 2 people with medical issues severe enough they had to bring with them some kind of medical equipment. And of course, being that 90% of the people that come to the seminar are Americans and Canadians, it seems an inevitable fact that most everyone over 40 is on some kind of prescription medication. Remember the old saying, 5 at 50? Hey, I've got one of those in my family, my brother. 4 years younger than me, he's on 18 different prescription meds. And me, the older brother, not one. Though you think it might be a coincidence, my brother's downed 18,000 more Whoppers, Big Macs, and bags of Cheetos than me? Is that a factor, you think? Oh, and speaking of my upcoming January 2021 Expat Insider Seminar, I'll be kicking it off in about a month and a half now. You know, you can still sign up, but the early bird discounts are over. Though I will be bending that rule because of the following circumstances. You see, I have a female and a male seminar attendee looking for roommates. That's same-sex roommates, of course. So I'm looking for a male and a female who want to save $750 off the single price. So if you're a male or a female looking for a roommate, I'll hold that early bird discount price for you. So if that's the case, send me an email right away, theexpatfiles@gmail.com. Oh, and finally, on the topic of opening up a brick and mortar business that we talked about in a previous show, we have James who wrote, Johnny, I own a bookstore in Connecticut. I know a bit of Spanish, so I was thinking maybe I could open up a bookstore in Latin America. I, too, am getting the hell out of Dodge, but I'll have to have something to do after a while and earn some kind of income, too. And I know everything and anything about running a bookstore. What do you think? Signed, James. Well, James, if you come down here and open a bookstore, you're asking for a life of starvation. If you think Americans don't read books much and it's on the downtrend, with Latin America, it's even worse. Though it's not because they don't like to read or don't want to read, it's just that the books are twice or even 3 times as much as they are up in the States. Again, it's a matter of volume and efficiencies. In fact, I recently ordered a book in Spanish, a paperback edition, a bestseller. That book, The Madness of Crowds, has been translated into Spanish. And guess where they shipped it from? The United Kingdom, England. So the shipping was about as much as it cost to buy the book. And that, believe it or not, was from Amazon. In the end, the total cost for a paperback bestseller plus shipping around $50. Totally ridiculous. What's up with that? Why can't they print the book in Mexico, Buenos Aires, Colombia? They've all got the proper facilities. But that's the story for all English bestsellers that eventually come out in Spanish. I just don't get it. How is it possible they're printed in Spanish in the States or in Europe, even though 99% of their market is in Central and South America? It just doesn't make sense. Well, it certainly adds extra costs and taxes, so that, to me, is one of the main problems. Books are so much more expensive here. And, you know, as far as ebooks and Kindle in Spanish, people just don't seem to have caught on to ebooks here like they have up in the States. The fact is you rarely see people with tablets down here. Sure, some upscale kids have them for school, but you don't see many adults with them. And try reading an ebook on a smartphone. The screen's way too small, so there's no fun or pleasure in that. You've been listening to the Expat Files, Living in Latin America. If you need some help with your own Plan B, we can schedule a one-on-one phone or Skype consult. Just send me an email, theexpatfiles@gmail.com. And if you want to get on the waiting list for my next week-long Expat Insider Seminar in Central America, where you're guaranteed to get a 2 to 5 year head start on your Plan B, send me an email, theexpatfiles@gmail.com. Nos vemos.